Claire Thompson stood on the edge of the crowded auditorium, her heart pounding in her chest. The air smelled faintly of perfume and polished wood, and the buzz of excited voices swirled around her. Today was graduation day, the day she had dreamed of for years, yet the excitement felt strangely hollow. She clutched the edge of her diploma folder, the paper inside still crisp and untouched, as if holding onto it might somehow make everything feel real. She scanned the sea of faces, searching for her grandparents, George and Lillian Thompson. Their presence had been a constant through every difficult moment in her life, their hands always ready to lift her up when she stumbled. Claire's eyes finally found them, their smiles warm and proud, and a flood of emotion washed over her. She had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was here, it felt like standing on the edge of something unknown. Claire's mind wandered back to the small, sunlit living room in her grandparents' house, where she had spent countless afternoons after school. She remembered the smell of her grandmother's fresh-baked cookies, the soft creak of the wooden floorboards as she tiptoed around the old furniture, and the gentle voice of George reading stories to her when sleep felt impossible. Those memories were stitched into her heart, reminders of the love and trust her grandparents had always shown her. She also remembered the stories George told her about responsibility and doing what was right, even when it was hard. Claire had always admired his quiet strength, the way he carried himself with dignity and fairness. Lillian, on the other hand, had a spark in her eyes that made every challenge seem conquerable, and her laughter could fill even the darkest corners of a room. Together, they had created a sanctuary for Claire, a place where she could dream freely, knowing she was safe and cherished. The thought of leaving college and stepping into the real world filled Claire with a strange mix of fear and anticipation. She had worked tirelessly for this day, but now that it was here, the future seemed like a vast, open ocean, and she felt small and unprepared to navigate its waves. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a single thought kept circling in her mind. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that would honor the love and guidance she had received from her grandparents. Her gaze shifted to her family seated nearby. Cousins, aunts, and uncles chatted amongst themselves, unaware of the storm of thoughts swirling inside Claire's head. She loved them, but she also knew that not everyone shared the same sense of responsibility or understanding of her grandparents' wishes. That realization made her stomach twist with unease, and a shadow of determination settled over her. Claire's eyes drifted back to George and Lillian. Their hands waved gently, their smiles steady and reassuring. In that moment, Claire made a silent promise to herself. She would find a way to protect the legacy her grandparents had built, to ensure their years of hard work and care would never be misused or taken for granted. The thought of keeping this secret filled her with a mix of fear and adrenaline. It was a bold step, and she wasn't sure if she had the courage, yet the desire to do what was right burned brighter than her fear. The ceremony began, and Claire's name echoed through the auditorium. As she walked across the stage, shaking hands with the dean and receiving her diploma, a quiet voice in her mind whispered, reminding her of the responsibilities she had yet to embrace. The applause from the audience felt distant, a mere backdrop to the whirlwind of emotions within her. Pride, fear, love, and anticipation all intertwined in a complex tapestry, each thread tugging at her heart. Later, when the crowd thinned and the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the campus lawn, Claire sat on a bench near the old oak tree where she had spent many afternoons studying and dreaming. The air was cool and smelled of fresh grass and autumn leaves. She held her diploma in her hands, the weight of it suddenly heavier than before. It wasn't just a symbol of achievement, it was a reminder that the world was vast, full of challenges, and that she now carried the responsibility of shaping her own path. Her thoughts turned again to her grandparents. Claire imagined the conversations they would have when she returned home, the stories they would share, the advice they would give. She felt a deep, unshakable love and an urgent need to protect them and the life they had built. The feeling was almost electric, a mix of devotion and determination that made her heartbeat quicken. This was the moment when Claire realized that life after graduation wasn't just about stepping into the future, it was about taking bold steps to guard the past and secure the legacy she cherished most. After returning home, Claire felt the weight of her decision pressing on her. The quiet streets of her small town seemed almost too peaceful, masking the turmoil she felt inside. She had always admired her grandparents' generosity and careful planning, but she knew the estate was vulnerable to disagreements and misunderstandings. If her family ever decided to dispute their wishes, everything George and Lillian had built could be at risk. The thought made her stomach twist and her palms sweat. Claire spent hours in the sunlit study of her grandparents' home, rifling through papers, old letters, and legal documents. Every detail mattered, every signature and clause was a potential safeguard or vulnerability. She had learned quickly how much trust and protection the law could provide, but she also understood that the wrong word or overlooked detail could unravel everything. Her mind raced with possibilities, weighing consequences and strategies, each thought heavier than the last. She finally sat down at the large oak desk, the same one she had used as a child for homework, and took a deep breath. This was not a simple decision, it was a bold step that required courage and absolute discretion. Claire knew she had to act quietly, without alerting her cousins, aunts, or uncles. The thought of their reactions both frightened and motivated her. Some of them might accuse her of betrayal, of taking control for her own gain, but Claire reminded herself that her intentions were pure. She was protecting her grandparents' legacy, nothing more. Her nights became restless as she planned every detail of the trust. She researched legal terms, spoke to experts, and carefully noted each step she needed to take. Every evening, she would sit with George and Lillian in the cozy living room, pretending to discuss ordinary things, while in her mind she drafted the legal framework that would safeguard their estate. The love and trust they had in her became her anchor, her source of courage when doubts threatened to overwhelm her. Claire imagined the day she would finally execute the trust. She could picture the lawyer's office, the sound of papers sliding across the polished table, and the quiet confirmation that everything was now secured. But she also imagined her family's reactions, the heated questions, and the sharp accusations. The tension twisted inside her, a mix of fear and anticipation that made her heart race. Could she truly do this without hurting anyone? Could she maintain the secrecy long enough to ensure her grandparents' wishes were respected? The decision weighed heavily on Claire, but one thought remained constant: she could not allow her grandparents' hard work and careful planning to be compromised. Each night, lying awake, she repeated their words in her mind, George's quiet wisdom, Lillian's unwavering encouragement, and found the resolve she needed. This was not just a legal maneuver, it was an act of love, a shield against possible greed and misunderstanding. Finally, after days of preparation, Claire knew she was ready. She had organized the documents, understood every clause, and planned for potential questions. The secret plan was no longer a theoretical idea, it was a tangible step that would soon become reality. With a deep breath, she closed the study door behind her, feeling both fear and determination pulse through her veins. Claire understood that this was more than a bold move, it was a responsibility, a promise, and a turning point in her life. Claire arrived at the lawyer's office with a mixture of nervousness and determination. The polished floors and the quiet hum of office equipment did little to calm the rapid beating of her heart. She clutched the folder containing the carefully organized documents, every sheet a piece of her grandparents' legacy she intended to protect. Sitting in the leather chair, she took a deep breath, reminding herself that this step was necessary, even if it felt overwhelming. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, was calm and professional, his demeanor reassuring as he explained each aspect of the trust. Claire listened intently, asking questions and taking notes, determined to understand every detail. She wanted to be sure nothing could go wrong, that the estate would be secure and her grandparents' wishes respected. Every clause, every signature, felt like a small victory in a larger battle she could not yet see. As the meeting progressed, Claire's mind wandered briefly to her grandparents. She imagined their faces, full of trust and hope, and felt a surge of courage. This was not just about legal documents, it was about honoring their lives and ensuring that the love and care they had poured into their estate would not be wasted. The thought gave her a quiet strength, steadying the nervous tremor in her hands. When the time came to sign the documents, Claire felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Each signature she placed on the papers was a small but significant step toward safeguarding her grandparents' legacy. She thought of the possible reactions from her family, the questions, the anger, and the confusion, but she reminded herself that her intention was pure. This was an act of protection, not of defiance. The lawyer nodded approvingly, confirming that everything was legally binding and fully secure. Claire exhaled a long, shaky breath, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. The trust was in place, a silent shield against any future disputes or misunderstandings. Yet even with this accomplishment, a sense of suspense lingered in her mind. She knew that keeping the family from discovering the details would require careful navigation. Returning home, Claire felt a strange mix of triumph and anxiety. The secret she carried was heavy, but it was a responsibility she embraced willingly. Every glance at her grandparents reminded her why she had taken this bold step. She knew that the path ahead might be challenging, but the knowledge that she had secured their estate gave her a quiet confidence. Claire understood that courage often came wrapped in uncertainty, and she was ready to face whatever came next. Claire returned home, the sense of accomplishment from securing the trust mingling with a growing tension she could not shake. She walked through the familiar rooms of her grandparents' house, every corner reminding her of childhood memories, and yet now each memory felt sharper, more fragile. She knew that the secret she carried could spark conflict if discovered prematurely. It didn't take long for her family to notice subtle changes. Cousin Kevin, always curious and somewhat suspicious, began asking questions about the estate, inquiring casually but with a sharpness that Claire could not ignore. Aunt Margaret's tone was pointed during family dinners, her eyes flicking toward Claire more than usual. Claire smiled politely, keeping her voice calm, all the while feeling her pulse quicken under the surface. She had anticipated this curiosity, yet the reality of it made her heart pound. Each interaction with her family became a careful balancing act. Claire spoke with measured words, careful not to reveal more than necessary, while internally navigating a maze of anxiety and determination. She found herself replaying conversations, analyzing gestures, and calculating responses, all in an effort to maintain her secret. The suspense was relentless, a constant hum in the background of her everyday life. Even though she faced these subtle challenges, Claire could not ignore the occasional pangs of guilt. She wondered if she was being unfair, if keeping the family in the dark was truly the right choice. Yet every time doubt crept in, she remembered her grandparents' trust in her judgment, their words of wisdom echoing in her mind. They had believed she could make difficult decisions, and that belief became her anchor, keeping her grounded amidst the tension. Days turned into weeks, and the small signs of suspicion continued. Questions from relatives, offhand comments, and subtle glances all reminded Claire that her secret was delicate. Each moment required vigilance, careful planning, and an unwavering focus on her purpose. It was exhausting, yet she remained steadfast, knowing that the stakes were too high to falter. Through it all, Claire found solace in the quiet moments with her grandparents. Sitting together in the living room, sharing tea and soft conversation, she drew strength from their love and approval. These moments reminded her why she had taken this bold step, why she had chosen to protect their estate, and why she had to remain resolute. The family's reactions added suspense and emotional tension to her life, but Claire understood that this challenge was part of the journey she had chosen, a journey of responsibility, courage, and unwavering loyalty. Tension in the Thompson household escalated as Claire navigated the quiet storm of suspicion and unspoken questions. Family gatherings that were once warm and lively now carried an undercurrent of unease. Cousin Kevin's probing comments and Aunt Margaret's pointed glances grew more persistent, and even some distant relatives began to whisper when Claire entered the room. The weight of her secret pressed heavily on her shoulders, each day feeling like a test of endurance and patience. Claire often found herself lying awake at night, the darkness of her room matching the turmoil in her mind. She replayed every conversation, second-guessing her responses, and wondering if she had been too bold, too secretive. Waves of guilt washed over her. Was she betraying her family, even with the best of intentions? The thought of disappointing anyone, especially her grandparents, sent chills down her spine, but she also knew that revealing the truth too early could jeopardize everything. Her emotions were a tangled web of fear, determination, and doubt. Claire struggled with the isolation her decision had brought. Friends who had once been close noticed her distracted mood, the way she sometimes jumped at phone calls or avoided certain topics. Claire explained little, knowing that no one could truly understand the responsibility she carried or the delicate balance she was trying to maintain. She found herself retreating to the quiet corners of her grandparents' home, seeking comfort in familiar spaces. The study where she had organized the trust became her refuge. Sitting there, surrounded by the smell of old books and the warmth of sunlight streaming through the windows, Claire reminded herself why she had chosen this path. Her grandparents had entrusted her with something invaluable, and she could not allow it to be compromised by greed or misunderstanding. Claire also recalled their words of encouragement. George's calm voice reminded her that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. Lillian's laughter echoed in her mind, teaching her that even in the midst of conflict, there could be joy and resilience. Drawing strength from these memories, Claire resolved to face the emotional turmoil head-on, understanding that protecting her grandparents' legacy required unwavering commitment. The conflict within the family remained, simmering just below the surface. Some members were frustrated and confused, suspecting hidden motives, while others were oblivious. Claire knew that the resolution would not be immediate, but she felt a quiet confidence in her decision. Her heart was heavy with worry, but also buoyed by the knowledge that she had acted with love and integrity. This was a crucible of emotion and suspense, a test of character, and Claire braced herself for whatever the coming days might bring. Eventually, the truth about the trust could no longer remain hidden. Claire's careful secrecy, while necessary, had reached the point where family questions could no longer be avoided. She called a meeting at her grandparents' home, choosing a quiet evening when the sunlight bathed the living room in a warm glow. Every family member gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and concern. Claire spoke with measured calm, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. She explained the trust, the reasons behind her decision, and the care she had taken to protect her grandparents' estate. She watched closely as expressions shifted across the room. Initial disbelief softened into understanding, confusion gave way to realization. Some were surprised, some relieved, and some slowly began to appreciate the courage it had taken to act as she had. Her grandparents, George and Lillian, smiled warmly, their eyes filled with pride. They reached for Claire's hands, squeezing them gently. Their trust and love, unwavering and steadfast, anchored her heart, reminding her why she had taken this bold step. The room, once tense with unspoken questions, began to fill with quiet acceptance and a renewed sense of family unity. Claire felt a wave of relief wash over her. The trust secured, her grandparents' wishes respected, she could finally breathe without the constant pressure of secrecy. The family's understanding, although not immediate, affirmed that her actions had been for the right reasons. The estate was protected, and the legacy her grandparents had built would endure without being compromised by misunderstanding or discord. Sitting later in the study, Claire reflected on the journey she had undertaken. The anxiety, the sleepless nights, the careful planning all had led to this moment of clarity and peace. She realized that bold steps, taken with love and integrity, could transform fear into strength and conflict into understanding. The lessons she had learned about responsibility, courage, and family would stay with her forever. As the sun set, casting golden light across the familiar rooms of her grandparents' home, Claire felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had honored her grandparents, safeguarded their legacy, and navigated the complexities of family with care. In that quiet evening, with the trust in place and her family finally aware of her intentions, Claire understood that she had grown not only into a protector of a legacy but into a stronger, wiser version of herself. The bold step she had taken after graduation had changed her life and the lives of those she loved, leaving her with a deep, lasting sense of accomplishment and peace.